Let's see if this works better. Good. Yeah. That's pretty big. Alright, so I'm still transcribing. As you can see, the white line has shifted up a little bit. And this is the whole Rajshahi, which is known as North Bengal, sometimes known as North Bengal. Rajshahi, Rangpur, Dinajpur, Chapanganj, Pabna. So the speed at which it transcribes and the focus that you need to put in there so that you don't make mistakes. It's easy to make mistakes. Don't transcribe in the middle of another piece of code. That will make a mess. Your parser will just throw a tantrum the size of 15 pages to put the error messages. Yes, very. And I've been cautious. I've been cautious about one thing. Where I put the push pin. I've always tried to put it in the center of the visible portion of the ground contact, because that produces a very accurate coordinate system that has offset relationship to the rest of the more accurate offset relationship to the rest of the BrickField. What you're going to do with that, I don't know. This is for educational purpose. I just needed to know how accurate could I make it. Now in this particular case, you see 2. I have a reason for doing 2 here. I never tag the same BrickField as 2 separate brickies. So let's do the history page. Here is the old round shaped Hoffman kiln. And here is the square one with the chimney here. In the round shape, the chimney was there. So it's 2 separate BrickFields because it has transited and it's part of the pattern. And you're not selling it? Hell no. That would be too much jhamela for the copyright issues. It's not for sale. It will be credited to Google because I'm making the KML entirely off of their client server services freely provided. So yeah, and I will talk to or try and get in touch with someone from Google, see if I can distribute the KML in Bangladesh, because what you can do with this, these are usually in even 40 years ago, nobody wanted to build up anything here. Nobody in their right mind would want to do anything right next to a river where you don't have a big road connection, electric connection, and coal supply line, and market connection, and labor proximity, and labor unrest, and all that kind of stuff. But in the last 40 years, this has happened. This is just North Bengal. I've got the KMLs for the rest of it. It just looks like exactly like the map of Bangladesh, except in 2 respects. Straight up mountain regions, but that is not so important because even in Chittagong they do BrickFields deep in the mountain, but not as much. And in this area, and somewhat in this area, and a little bit in this area, these are wetlands. They can't have it. And down here by the Sundarbans, they have to be very careful because you dig 10 feet, you get hit salt water. And they have a huge, in this area, they have a huge drying yard drainage issue in a lot of the places. So what it relates to from the industrial perspective is all of these BrickFields are now been acquired, developed, and connected with the essential ingredients of a industry. And that means you can have, there's a possibility because you don't need this many BrickFields because they're inefficient if you run inefficient ones. you can free up at least half, if not 60%, 66% of the land. And let's take a measure. .12 mile, and this is a small one, so I'm just going to give it a little extra girth. 1.18 mile. Okay, so let's go to calculator. 0.18 into 0.12 into 642 acres per square mile. That's 13 acres. 13 acres is pretty big for Bangladesh to have for one factory. And it's got all the basic necessities. It's got water, if you can provide a pump. It's got road, because brick is one of the heaviest commodities to move across Bangladesh. The heaviest after rebar and cement. And it's got road communication, and it's got market demand, because people who buy bricks, they live in towns and they listen to advertisements. So holy cow, this is like a marketing tool. Yes, it could be, but this is a large data set. It does not cut into calculus that easily. You have to be physically present. You have to be physically present and provide your services to the market proposal. And if the market wants to keep you, market will keep you, otherwise it won't. So that's pretty much what you get. You get about 15 to 20 acres per BrickField. So usually they come in clusters of 3. Sometimes 2, very rare. 4 and 5 are rarer, but if it goes more than that, then you have what I sometimes call a girdle. A simple girdle example would be, let's see. Let's show the Dhaka girdle. Holy cow, it's scary. It's fucking scary. Outside of town, outside of town, outside of town, go outside. This should be, get this out of here. What did I do? I lost it. Oh crap. Here's Dhaka girdle. This is like back-to-back BrickField gridlock. And because it's such a heavy commodity, if you can move that, and if you don't need the BrickFields at some point, if you can move that out of there, and if you don't need the BrickFields at some point, and this ground is hardened and flat because it necessarily needs to be, it's industry setup ready. So it's a pretty decent map, and it's still not for sale because it's a large data set. You don't want to stick your hand in there and like say, it's my hat and my map and you pay. Fuck that shit. I'm not doing it for that. I have a love for large data set. When God taught me how to do databases 30 years ago, without feeling headaches, I learned this. I was able to visually just see what's there and enumerate it. Hyper-fast speed. But there's no end to it. Sufficiently enumerated, yes. Fully enumerated, almost no data set is fully enumerated. So it pretty much, if you look closely here, this line here, it is a road. I'll bet it's a road or a train line, something like that. So you get cross connections of data sets that have not been tagged here. You just know that they're there. And pollution is a big problem, and BrickFields is the second biggest contributor of pollution in Bangladesh, after trucks and buses and cars. And regular industries that have chemical effluents that they don't process. So Anyway, so I hope you enjoy this, and it's tedious, but if you like tedious, more power to you, and if you don't, you better find out why not, because there has to be a particular reason why you don't like it. It's not me, it's not a real answer. I enjoy doing this. So when you copy paste like this one line, the first line, the XML version thing, it has to go out. And then when you have a whole bunch of KMLs lined up like that, excess KML statements, declarations, and document declarations, they can go. Basic programming. How long would it take for a kid to do it? About the same time, because I become like a kid when I do it. 250 hours. Except most kids in Bangladesh do not have 250 hours free. Some do. How much would it take for a more grown-up person to do it? Try 600 hours and you'll probably call your psychiatrist. It's a whole lot cheaper than buying an AI. Make your own math. It's for your self-education. If everyone can make it, no one's going to buy it, right? But if it goes to government, I'm sure the government would be more than happy to pay for the copyright of usage and stuff like that. If it doesn't go to the government and if no money changes hands, then I don't think Google will say anything, but I will still clarify it with Google. Because I don't want any hassles from them. They might just tag me for life, you know. It's nothing that drastic, and just say, you can't have our client anymore. I don't want to. So the whole bunch of extra returns that I hit, they produced a bunch of lines. So now I can just click and find a line that's empty. But if you don't have an empty line, the mouse won't go. This is a trick I learned when I used to use DOS's edit to write code. I preferred it to more orthodox this and the onboard editor of some of the languages. When I was in Colorado, I would write code in 3 different languages just to stay sane and even keel and felt love. I would write in QBasic, I would write in Pascal, and I would write it in DBase 3+, and I would write it in DOS's edit. Because when I learned to program, I didn't have a computer. I had to write it. It's still a habit. If I have to write a little routine for something or the other telephones or whatever not, I have to write one for this. I will write it in DOS's edit. Because if you write it in a little compiler editor, the temptation for willy-nilly checking is too great. And that wreaks havoc with your thought processes. So when this is done, you can write a string extractor algorithm for a page and a half, 2 1/4 page, and just get these things out. Just get these latitude, longitude out. Then you can put it in a database, and that database can correlate, say, BrickFields and roads and highways and the transportation department. And that I think the government should pay for. I'm not going to pay for it because I'm not a truckie, I'm not a roadie, and I'm not a brickie. I'm just a student of anthropology. And I like large data set. To me, I have found some really interesting patterns here. I would not have found if I had not gone after. There's somewhere in here. Naqshi Kathar Mart. There are land division patterns that defies land office practices. Like there's one that looks like a lotus flower. Like what the heck? It's like a paisley on a quilt. Somebody was having a whole hell of a lot of fun. That's how I tagged it. And I find things like, the coal wash of Borapukriya. The canal water runs black. Well, dude, it's visual. Don't tell me it's not available. And I have Allah be praised, I love Allah. He has given me a great love for remembering simple things in simple ways. If I look at it once, I'll remember, such as this puppy is too small. Why did I tag it that way? Oh, they removed it. It's an old one. It's a historical. I have been pretty much religiously strict about, if I tag something, I go and check the history file. And sometimes I find underlays of kiln. There's one kiln in the Chittagong Hill Tracts which is way small, like 115 feet. These ones are 228 feet, usually. Go to feet. Between 208 and 228. What you got? 224. Yeah, bingo. And if you make a mistake, come back on another thumbtack and go paste, just to make sure. And if you don't think you put it in, put it in. If it's duplicated here, once you extract the longitude, latitude, it'll sort them out. You can just sort and index it, and the database is clean. And then you take the database and you generate another KML. And that, of course, you will need Google's permission to run on Google, unless it's for education purposes. Education purposes, Google doesn't mind. Google just wants that you give them credit. Them and whoever's images you're using. This image right here is CNE. If you're going to publish it, if you're just going to use it for internal purposes, I don't think Google cares about it much, and nor can it control it. It's not really possible. CNE Airbus. Now that's not possible. I've got 10,000 markers here. I can't do that. So I have to talk to them as to how they want to be acknowledged. What is it called? Bibliography. Credits and bibliographies and something like that. I miss my ex-wife. She was very good at it. She had to check copyright all the time. She has a PhD in organic chemistry. And she makes glass, art glass, and acrylic paintings, and quilt. She had a very stable head on her shoulders. I tend to talk to myself too. Right now I have an imaginary audience whom I am hoping to captivate. No, I'm not. This is just a demo. It is a demo of its tedium. It is absolute tedium, and you cannot have a single letter out of place here. The longest chunk of appended code, 161,000 lines. But Notepad, which is an enhanced version of DOS's Edit, is very good at taking out duplicates. Except sometimes, because it's KML, there are some, because it's Notepad and KML uses some punctuation marks which are proprietary in Notepad. If you copy, it'll copy a line and there's that expression in the middle, say comma or semicolon. In the middle, it'll copy up to the semicolon and then not copy the rest. And you have to redo the other part, then it allows it. I don't know what's going on in Notepad. So I went and downloaded Notepad++, but I don't think I'm going to need it. Yeah, I'm going to have some motion in front of the camera, otherwise the camera goes off. Might not perceive the television as a motion thing. It is a TV with the HDMI and it has a VGA socket too. The VGA socket makes the screen just this much. It won't let it go. And it's a smart TV, so I was running it even on the HDMI this big. Then it suddenly went and found the driver and poof, I have full screen. I got this for in trade. It's got a busted capacitor in it, so if you turn it off with the remote and if you stand by for 15 minutes, you have to get up and physically turn it on again. So I got it for this and a very nice bed for 150 bucks. However, this I'm using, the bed I don't use. It's a, yeah, I don't like sleeping in beds. I like hard surfaces with it. It's comfortable if I'm injured or something like that, or in the winter, but I like sleeping in front of my television. Because it has a proximity alarm, because and some things about the remote are busted up. It throws a proximity exception, and there's nothing on the remote that will stop it except turning it off and turning it on again. But if you sit too close, it will go on the alarm. I can't reset that thing. That reset portion of the remote is out of access. That functionality is gone. I don't mind. If I had an 8088, I wouldn't be here in the first place. So the reason you want to extract those coordinates, because in a GIS, coordinates are almost 99% of everything. All of the data representation anchors to the coordinates. And once you can have a regular, Microsoft Access or DVST Plus type or a Delphi type database, you can write it to any level of intelligent decision making design you want. But first you have to learn this. And one of the things you have to learn hurts like a big to-do tedium. And if you don't know how to do it, you won't be knowing how to code it either. That's just be statistical guesswork. This is what this is. This is an exercise of patience with data in the raw. And love, baby. So far I've gotten 20,000 lines, which is about 400 BrickFields, because each segment, each push pin represents about 50 lines of KML code. 48. And I'm giving one space between them just to be sure visually, because it's an old habit. Machine time was precious, so we were like fastidious about indenting. If you are looking for an anomaly, one good way of looking for an anomaly would be this. A little bit of off geometry and it's probably got to be a different fucking number. Sorry. And it tells you what you're looking at. This line is a line descriptor. This one is a line descriptor. Because a lot of the BrickFields, anyway, so you got the picture, right? It happens in India more. In Bangladesh, no. Bangladesh, when you buy land from the farmer, it's cheap. But sometimes you can't, so the BrickField will have a kiln here, and a drying yard here, and a drying yard there. So I tend to connect them with thin white lines. And so I don't know how that's going to extract out. I don't care. Details are details. I like details. I don't do data work for a living. I just don't do data work. This might resemble data work. It's actually visually re-describing a visual input. And it's for myself. I will not do it for institutional setting. I will never do that. Not that I'm too old. I still feel as young as I was when I first started coding at 28. That was 30 years ago. I could do this lying in front of the computer. If I were to code, I would have to sit up. I just have to sit up. And I could do this for 8-9 hours. Easy. And when you can do raw data very, very easily, that thing about don't write more than 3 pages of code a day, it just kind of goes out the window because it doesn't put that much pressure on you when you're visualizing what you're writing about. It just comes off as a love song that's in you, and you sing it to the end. I'm going to keep it up until this screen is cleaned, and then I'm going to find out what this white line is about. I don't seem to remember, but it will come to me. Am I familiar with KML? Its logic is as simple as DBase3 plus without the ifs and the loops. I don't know what this is. Oh, it was when I was putting the push pins in, it was a marker. It was telling me when to stop or how far I'd gone. Because in the beginning I had to redo on 3 occasions I had to redo my work because Google Earth hung. Oh man, I lost 4 hours of work in Borichal, about 3 hours of work in Bogota and Rampur. I just did it again because that's a test of your resilience as well. Okay, so at this point you hit on this thing's property. This is a marker line. And you relocate it so that Google Earth, even if it tells you, hey, this area is still needing, no it's not. I have been burnt once with that. I am not going to go there again. And it's kind of a nice feature here. If you do a path, it's kind of like a movable fence around your work zone.